Hi everyone, I'm Brownbear and welcome to Written TV and Jambo Radio's Cultural Conversations for Black History Month. I'm joined today by singer-songwriter Becky Sikasa and George Ta from Jambo Radio, and we're just going to have a conversation about what it means to be in the music industry in both Scotland and beyond as a black performer or a black industry professional. So let's get started with introductions. Becky, do you want to introduce yourself? Tell us a bit about yourself, your music, and also how you got started in music.
Hi, I'm Becky. Thanks so much for inviting me into this conversation today. I started music from a young age, playing the piano, and my family's always been a bit somewhat musical, not necessarily on a professional level, but just there's always been a music around. I came to Scotland first when I went to uni to study music at Napier in Edinburgh, and in terms of the music I make now, I've only just last year launched a solo project. I was in a duo before, so it's been a strange time to start a new project, to say the least. But it's been a strange time for anyone. So
do you think it's been a good time to start? Do you think it's been nice to have, because quite often when you started before, it would be the case that we have to gig, we have to do this, and it takes away. Have you felt that this has given you time to just be patient and get it right and prepare, or is it a bit scarier because it's so media based?
Yeah, I think I've always felt much more confident, like in a kind of direct exchange with people, like on a stage, and in a room. You play and you feel that people feel something, and that kind of keeps you going. Like especially in the beginning when you're kind of finding your feet. It's been a challenge for me for sure. And then like I've been crafting like all this music and then learning so much about production during this time. That has been obviously really good for, I think so many of us have used this time to like really get into our dolls and get into like music production more. So that's been great. But then like you're sitting on all these songs and you're like, oh, I want to launch, I want to do something. And yeah, it's been a test of patience, I guess.
Yeah, I think a lot of artists are feeling that, and if anyone's watching, it's like this anxiety of, okay, how do we really? It was easy before, but I feel like the way people engage with content now has even changed.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you even reach people in the same manner? So that's been a challenge. But thanks for that. And George, you want to tell us a bit about yourself and a bit about Jambo Radio?
Yes, thank you very much, Matt, for inviting me to this conversation. I have a really wonderful connection with music because before I started working in the media, in broadcast media, I was a DJ for a very long time. I DJed in clubs in Glasgow, mostly. Do travel the country for wedding gigs and all of that. So I've always had a passion for music, and I spent 15 years being a DJ. So you can see the connection there. So Jambo Radio only came into place last year at the peak of the pandemic, and that was because there was urgent need for a platform like Jambo Radio to communicate the messages on COVID, because there was a lot of misinformation within the African and Caribbean communities, because trying to understand the scientific explanation of COVID was already, the mainstream media were baffled by that, let alone trying to explain that to someone that whose first language is not English. Then that was a big issue. So we, in the time around 2019, I started planning the idea to have a radio station for people of African and Caribbean heritage. In fact, Black people in Scotland, because that was something that's a massive gap that it wasn't existing. And every time you tune, like, where do I hear the music that is done by? I met a lot of musicians of African and Caribbean heritage in Glasgow that are doing music, but where do I listen to their song? Where are their songs having the first play? Where is this happening? It's not going to be only on BBC One Extra, and BBC One Extra probably have a kind of different focus than other music, so for me, that was one reason why Jambo Radio needed to be in place. So COVID makes it more important for it to come in place.
Yeah.
And since then, we're up and running. So we're looking to broaden our visibility.
Did you feel this is a question for both, I suppose, and this is a kind of an ongoing debate, but did you ever feel like blackness was a thing, or did you really come in with this mindset of like African and Caribbean, and then as you spent more time in areas like Glasgow, did you realise that blackness was a thing? Because I feel like if you've grown up or you've come from an African background, like to say black is almost a bit, when you're in Africa, like everyone's essentially black, so like you don't view it as blackness, and you meet a lot of Africans, but when they come to Britain, they start to realise, oh, blackness is almost like it's a lot heavier, I think, in the UK and the US because of the dual heritage, or maybe the separation from the heritage.
Yeah, I think I know I always say this: the political correct way to kind of refer, especially in Scotland, to refer to Black people will be, either you tag them to a particular heritage, which is African and Caribbean heritage. That's that's a politically correct way, which the mainstream kind of accepts, because blackness, it makes them, saying black is very some communications don't go really well when you refer to black, in my experience, basically. But I have seen, I've been in Scotland for 18 years, and I've seen kids that have been born here and grew up. They are black, they are Scottish. Now, you cannot directly refer to them as African and Caribbean heritage. Unlike me, that was born in Africa, then moved over here, and then, spent my adult age here, I could perhaps relate to African heritage. But what about the kid that is born in Scotland, is black, of black parents? They are not directly African heritage. They have the Scottish heritage first, and then they have then they are black. So I see blackness as something, because in my, working in the media has exposed me to some of this, the nuances that are inside this conversation of how do you refer to Black people? How do we have a conversation of, are you African? Are you Black? Are you Black British? Are you Black Scottish? Are you this? So all that sort of conversation. But for me, from the point of view of Jambo Radio, we see Black and Scottish as an identity.
Yeah. I mean, Becky?
I think I come from a very different experience, because I didn't grow up in Scotland, but I grew up in Germany in a small town, and I think small town Scotland and small town, especially in Bavaria in the south of Germany, it's probably quite comparable in terms of how many other people do you find in your town that look like you. And to be honest, it was pretty much nobody. Like, if they weren't my brother, my sister, or my dad, they weren't going to be Black.
Yeah.
So I think it's very much, you're more Black than, like, my dad's Kenyan, but I think I was more perceived as mixed than as mixed Kenyan, because it's what you see, you know what I mean? So I think it's definitely always been I don't know, something you realize in the way that people come towards you, or like the way that you come across towards people. And then coming to Scotland, I think I found a similar experience, but it was odd because suddenly when I moved to Scotland, I was also German, which I'd never been before. Like, before I was always the least German person of everyone, and suddenly I was like the most German person. So it was quite an odd change.
This is it. I grew up in the west coast of Scotland, and I was born here. My mum was actually born here, but her parents were Nigerian. And so to me, I've always been Scottish, but then somewhere along the line, you were never accepted as Scottish. But like you say, if I go abroad, people are like, you're definitely Scottish, right? And if you go back, I mean, I've got friends who are Kenyan and their sons are mixed. And when they go back, people in Kenya call them 0.5. They're like, oh, you're not Black, or, you're mixed. But to hear it in Scotland, and in a way, and a kind of almost a sad way in Scotland, like, anyone who's not white's Black. Mm-hmm. And in some ways, it's a really strange culture, and it is a hard thing. I think being mixed is a weird place to be, because you're of dual heritage, but you have so much connection to both. But you're almost like black by default, and but maybe sometimes when you meet, it's different for different people. Sometimes you meet black people who are like, well, you're not fully black. But I feel like certain places, like you meet, I feel like even when you've never been to Africa, there's some African people who are like, it doesn't matter, you're African. It's like, nah, African's Africa, you know, and there's this connection to what we perceive as home. But my first record was called What Is Home, and I struggled for a long time to figure out, well, what is my place? Because I always grew up feeling Scottish, and then somewhere along the line, this country made me realise I wasn't. Even though I've got no other claim to be anything other than that, I wasn't accepted as that. And then this is where black comes into it, because what we have as a common bond is blackness, I suppose, in the history. Like, and I try to say this because quite often people say, like, and I don't think that we should ever be defined by negative history, but we do all have a point in history that does bind black and African and Caribbean people, and it's horrific, but we have that binding. The same as Jewish communities, they have a part in history that kind of binds them, and that's why we have something that's a bit more than just race, right? It's culture, and it's not a linear, one-dimensional thing, and but it's good that we're able to have open conversations about it. But it can be, I don't know, see, this is a question for you both as well. Do you find it hard when we can have these conversations and we understand them, but sometimes in social media, black people take these conversations out without context, and they then are used as justifications by the right wing or the white to say, like, you know, they might go, well, I don't really feel that I should be black or blackness exists, and then it becomes a vehicle for people who are racist or who are right wing and go, see, this black person said this, so now it's a justification for my negative views of Black Lives Matter or Black History Month. Or do you feel like that's an issue?
I think, Matt, there is an issue of, I think the narratives that have been used, some of them are the way I think the channels, whether it's social media or political parties or political interest or mainstream media, the way they struggle to find the right narrative, it makes it really difficult. Now, you said something there, which is until your identity started to be questioned by the very country that that you're born in, then it becomes a big issue. Like, okay, for me, it will be so automatic that, you would hear me, you hear my accent, you go like, somewhere Africa. That's what I'll be identified as. But that doesn't, that just means that the messages that have been communicated to people that will just instantly refer to me as African is because my accent is not mainstream, So, and I can see why when you go abroad, then once you speak, your Scottish accent will say, oh, they just identify you as Scottish. This is the thing. What is their identity? Until we begin to have this conversation, we need to continue to have this conversation, irrespective of whether right-wing political narratives are beginning to interfere with it, or the mainstream media is struggling to communicate that messages, or the less recognition. I mean, when we started this conversation, you actually mentioned something which I noted. The significance of artists, musicians that have won, I think the prize is Mercury Prize.
Mercury Prize, yeah.
Yes, and the black artists, they basically just show up in the news as some of the news piece. Unlike other white artists have done that. I don't think. I mean, for a long time, the music industry, just like the movies industry and even the media industry, or not even the media industry, and every other institution has been structured in a way that it makes this narrative, they really play well. That every time you struggle, you struggle to ask, oh, are you black, or are you African? Are you, all those things are things that we need to have the conversation and define. If you're black, you're black. if you're African, if you want to identify as African, that should be your option, your choice. But Black is a race, it's a color. Just like a white person, you don't cannot say, I'm white Irish. You can't say I'm white. I know those things as well. They play in an official document where you want to fill in an application form for employment. They ask if you're white Scottish or you're white Irish. You're white. All those things play as well. Those narratives need to change. But those are structural things. Those are institutional things that need to change. So that's a starting point. But it shouldn't stop us having this conversation and frankly talking about what needs to be changed, because if we spend time trying to align with what narrative we think we might be emotionally attached to, that's not going to help. So for us at Jambo Radio, that is exactly what it is. Jambo Radio is not for African, it's for not for Caribbean, but because you can politically say it's politically correct to say African and Caribbean, but it essentially just means Black. But so that's the thing. Now, how do you change the narrative of Jambo Radio to say this is the only Black radio station in Scotland, or is this the only radio station for Black people in Scotland? Therefore, Black music, Black comedy, Black drama, Black everything. It's been challenging, So it's trying to have that balance there, but we need to have this conversation.
Yeah. Becky, to bring it back to fully circle to music, like obviously, how do you feel that works in terms of music and genre? And part of this conversation is that quite often when we talk about music and Black music, especially even Mobo, I don't know if we all saw this year, that Mobo, kind of the Novo sisters, are a indie rock band, a kind of rock, more on the rock to metal side, a duo, and they kind of called out Mobo to say, like Mobo doesn't have a category for alternative rock or indie music, but Black people operate in all genres, and all music has a kind of basis in Black history. Like a lot of rock and roll and blues came from Black musicians, so even to get through to where we are, has a culture steeped in Black and a Black American, Black UK culture as well. So like how do you find that Blackness affects you as an artist? Is it something you think about? Is it something that you think should matter? Or do you feel that Black people are often put into boxes, like you're expected to be a soul or indie or R&B, and kind of you don't, it's like it would be weird for you to be in the indie circuit or to be in the songwriter circuit?
Yeah, I think it's definitely something I encountered a lot, especially when I first came here, that people always assumed that I would do R&B or hip hop music, or would get approached in that way a lot. So I think there's a part of you a part of me that wanted to kind of like prove them wrong in a way, and almost then, even though I did have quite a lot of background in soul as well, and the way that I sing and everything, even though like it's partially singer-songwriter style, there's always been soul in it, and like it's always been really vocal based, and I think my vocal does do that soul thing. So I think it's taken me some time to then kind of come back to it and realize, okay, what is it that I want, rather than just what am I trying to prove people are wrong with, that I'm not just this box that
that's I think a hard thing for artists in general, because I think no matter your race or gender, I'm not sure you ever want to be in a box, because it's sort of like saying, well, that's all you're allowed to do. And there's I think I don't, maybe this is as an outsider who's been and played shows in Germany, and I love the German music market. I've always found Germany to be a place that just looks at music as music, so they don't. You wouldn't necessarily find a band or an artist who's the same genre and the same bill. They just, as long as it's kind of music and people will like it, it will be there. Whereas we have very much like, well, it's an indie band, so it's almost the band that support them almost sound identical to the headliner, and you think, what? I'm just watching like a lesser version of the band I want to see. Almost, it's this weird. Whereas I as a music fan, I've listened to all music and all genres, and I did a bit of like yourself, Becky. I had this thing. I was like, well, I'm going to prove I can do indie music and do the rock thing, and then I made the first album, and that's cool. But when I made the first single for the record that's going to come, Retro, I'd relax a lot, and I was playing keys, and it came out a lot more soul. I felt really good because it felt like a lovely blend of indie and soul. But then people started saying in our team, like, "Oh, that's the most you've ever sounded," and what they meant was like that actually suits your face. So it was this weighted thing of like, I'm so proud of it because it is me, but now I'm a bit hurt that like you didn't really see the rest of that as me because it still was me.
Yeah.
So it's a weird thing to be an artist, and maybe that's something you could tell about, Becky. Like, what have you found the differences in being, even taking anything like race out of it? Like, what do you find the differences between the culture of music in Germany and in Scotland or in the UK?
I feel like the UK has a different, like, kind of grassroots, like, what's the word? There's more of a fluid progression between like where you start out and where, you know, people are that even are played on the radio and so on. Like in Germany, there's a lot more gatekeeping with those things. I find, so you're either in that particular thing or you're not, and then you have to do everything like very separate from that part of the music industry. And I think in Germany particularly, radio play and all these kind of things, everything's it's especially these days, it's very geared towards, it has to be German language and like either that German kind of Schlager pop or German hip hop does well. So there's those two big things. And aside from that, of course, like I'm exaggerating now, but like, I think the UK has maybe more of a variety and more of a nuanced kind of sub-genre type of industry. I don't know, it just feels a bit more fluid, I guess.
Yeah, there's a lot more of a competitive market, but then it's still got the gatekeepery thing, and I think we struggle with the major to indie thing. It's a very major label, and this is a question for you both, and I suppose maybe first and foremost, George, is do you feel that as Scotland, as Scottish music industry representatives, do you feel that Scotland and its radio should have quotas? Do you think we should have, like, every radio should play a percentage of artists that are Scottish? Because if you think about the big radios like Clyde, and they don't really play Scottish artists and they don't play local, you know, they've got all their subdivisions of like the West for Ayrshire, Clyde for Glasgow and Greater, and so on, but they don't play artists even from those areas like Scottish, unless you're the Snuts or Capaldi, the major label artists who have all the money and they're going to be on Radio 1 anyway. Do you think that's something that as Scots we should be pushing to say, you know what, we want to see like quotas set to ensure that Scottish talent is heard on all? I know BBC maybe have that in place, but out with that, you know, Bauer Group don't really, and a lot of our playlists are actually coming from London up to Scotland and just having Scottish DJs kind of put on them. So we'll start with George on that. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, no, absolutely. You know, that's something we've started a new slot for Jambo Radio, which is Made in Scotland. We call it Made in Scotland. Made in Scotland is basically showcasing Scottish talent in music. It's a playlist of just music that is done in Scotland. It doesn't matter what genre, it has to be music that is done in Scotland locally. So that's our own way to see that. I think Bauer Media, obviously, excuse me, a big commercial entity, and to see that Clyde 1, Clyde 2 are not doing that, and London seems to still control the playlist. It's a shame, really. But those are the narrative that need to change. That's the beginning of changes of narrative. Because if you don't, it seems odd. I watch like the rap game and things like that. I saw some of the Scottish artists that they went there, and then the way they explained the story. And it's like, if you don't hit London, then you absolutely not gonna go anywhere. So for a very long time, I've watched all this music competition, and when there's ever been a Scottish representation, there's always been like, it's so far away, it's a flight away. You know, it's a 1 hour flight away. It's just it is all the perception. So I think it's been it's a big thing. The radio station needs to be representative of the local communities, and there should be a quota. I agree with that. There should be a quota for all radio stations in Scotland to be playing local Scottish music bands that are making music in Scotland. All of that they need to. I mean, Jambo Radio would be a complete in the mainstream will be a complete foreign radio station to be doing that for Scotland, and that's a disgrace, to be honest with you. So it's absolutely important that Clyde and even the BBC Scotland need to look at that. I know BBC Scotland is also still controlled from London, so there's always a big problem with who is the controlling stake, which is almost all the medias in Scotland seems to be controlled from London. Well, apart from Jambo Radio, basically.
So everyone should just tune into Jambo Radio because they're
well, so that's what it is. Yeah. So there should be a quota. There should be a quota system that the playlist is representative of the people listening to it, the communities. We have so much talent in Scotland. There's a lot of I know a lot of people have said this, but what are they doing about it?
Yeah. And we'll bring this to you, Becky, and as from the artist side of things, like there is this thing here where it's like it's almost like a few artists think there's maybe one or two people who do the London thing or get assigned in London or whatever. So it's almost like everyone in Scotland competes for London. But from my experience of music, the London market's like they don't know what's happening. Music in general doesn't know what's happening, and they don't know how to turn it into sales. And there's this big thing, from Radio 1 plays that you could be playing on Radio 1 and get like 100 followers, but it translates to no sales. And then you go on Dunoon community radio and 10 people follow you and 10 people buy your records, and that's been worth more than Radio 1. So radio should serve their community, as George is saying. And I find it mad that we put artists out down to like London and they get signed, and then we basically import our own music. We have to buy it back and listen to it up here, even though 100,000 records, you'd definitely be number one, right? There's 500,000 people in Glasgow, so it's like, why are we not thinking about how we mobilise the millions of people in Scotland to make sure that all our artists are selling number one records, and everyone goes, hey, how are Scotland doing it better? How are they succeeding in the sale of music and their artists, and we should be exporting our cultural goods? So what's your thoughts, Becky? Do you feel like there's a way to challenge that? How have you found that? Have you felt like you had to go to London, or have you felt like, nah, I've got a thing up here? And
I think it goes up and down. I think a lot of how you're doing as an artist is to do with who are you surrounded by, like who are your people, your people that you work with, people that you write with or play with, or all those things matter so much. So I think, it's always been a question where to best, I don't know, be based in order to kind of succeed with music, or to like make the most of your music. I've not quite got the answer for it, to be honest.
How have you found it? Because you're obviously very actively in two markets with the German. I mean, you've got shows selling out in Germany. How do you find managing two markets, or have you thought, no, I want to turn my attention to the UK, or do you think because of streaming and the internet and social media, do you just feel like, well, it's just one global market now?
No, I think it's definitely two separate things, and it is quite a challenge a lot of the time, I find, and I kind of have been like hopping back and forth between the places, and I think a big part of that is what you were talking about earlier about where am I at home, musically as well as personally, I think. So I think I'll let you know when I know.
I think for all creatives, we're just constantly on a journey of trying to figure out who we are and what we're doing, and then somehow that turns into art, and that's amazing. And just to stay with yourself, Becky, like how have you found then the other obstacles, like, and with gender? Like obviously a massive push in music has been to try and get that gender balance up, and they're kind of touting 50-50 in the UK, but I feel like it's quite weighted. I feel like even if there are 50-50 jobs, it's very much lower end jobs versus high end still having the power, but at least there's a bit of mobility. And how have you found and all your experiences, like gender and race, have they overlapped, or have you felt that maybe gender has been a bigger obstacle, or race, or different experiences in different situations?
It's probably difficult to pick the two apart because I've never been only one or the other.
Totally.
So I've definitely found that growing up, I never saw anyone who looked like me in any of the roles in the music industry that I was aware of. If that's in booking or artists on stage, we're obviously still more male, and then session musicians, of course, management, even in educational roles, a lot of the time there were just a lot of males. So I think that, and all those males were generally white as well. So I guess it's just a matter of representation has always just been very, very limited, and I think I took a much longer time to find confidence in any of those kind of male typical roles, and feeling confident within production and within even just my own musicianship. It's definitely, I think, taken me a little longer to get to a point of, it's a constant, rotation of like, no, it's fine. You are doing fine. It's fine.
And there is, and in the same way that there's stereotypes for Black musicians being hip hop or whatever, there's stereotypes that female artists are singers, but they don't get seen as great instrumentalists, or maybe piano and singing, but not guitar or drums. And there's still so many. I mean, I've seen it on tours. We work on. I've worked on tours as well, and we've had some amazing musicians work with us who have been female as well. And the difference, even in the way sound engineers speak to them compared to counterparts, and you're standing there dumbfounded, just like you can't really believe that it's happening, and you know that person's actually the most exceptional person on stage. You're like, well, they're the person we can't believe is on the stage, and you're speaking to them like they don't know. It's the rest of the boys in the band that don't know how in-ears work. You know what I mean? It's like,
I found that a lot, that people like still address, like, even if you're clearly the solo artist or whatever, but the tech still sometimes just addresses the session musicians for like creative decision making on the stage or whatever, and it's just like, no, I want to make that decision. Hello.
Yeah. I've had it, and I don't know if it's a Black thing or being younger, but I've had it as tour managers where I've told, they've come, like, you ask someone else and I still, I'm the tour manager, and it's this look of like, you, and you think, yeah.
Oh my God.
And I see it happen to female musicians where it's almost like the Alaska male counterpart. And it's like, well, that question should be directed at them, and I find that tough. I find it tough that we even have that, and then it makes me start to think, well, we're talking about, and there's obviously a lot of funds right now and conversations for gender and for race, but what about for Black, I would say, but I don't feel like they're the same conversations for Asian and Southeast Asian artists, and I don't feel like there's much conversation about accessibility for artists who maybe have both physical and hidden disabilities, because that in itself is a huge thing. And for me, I look at the most venues and they're in a basement and down the stairs. I mean, they're not even easily accessible for the people who have to be the crew, let alone anyone who may have a disability that makes it even harder to access. And it's like, at what point do we say, you know what, we want to have safe, accessible spaces for people? It's made it, lockdowns, I think, made us all sit and question where we are as humans. And I've done a lot of talks and a lot of work to do, and Becky, you can touch on this as well, because you're doing that outside of music, to do with equality and diversity and accessibility. And you think, gosh, am I going to go back into the same system where it's just like, well, tough luck, like, because it's mostly very seedy, male-orientated spaces that I wouldn't even necessarily are like in any way safer, friendly zones for people of an ethnic background or a female background, or when we bring in binary and trans and all these things, and then you get to other things like disability, and it's like, it comes to the quota thing. Is it like, I'm a big believer that like we need to stop talking about equality as this kind of utopian end goal and start making it the start point, where it's like, if you don't have these things in place, then you don't get to function. If your venue isn't accessible, then you're not a venue. instead of this thing like, oh, we would, but it costs money, and it's so that's you, like you as a person who isn't what we describe mainstream, enjoying yourself is too much effort. It should be like everyone has the right and the access to these spaces. And music and arts, I think it's worse when it isn't, because it's supposed to be liberal and inspiring, and it's supposed to lift people out of that position. And I feel like somewhere along the line, music and art and film have almost turned its back on that, and it's become just, music in particular, so commercially driven that it's right in the same ballgame as any other corporation that doesn't really care about the average worker or user of their facilities.
Yeah, can I just say, it's a very good point you raised there. And in terms of equality and diversity, you will know there's the Race Equality Act in Scotland is complete. I don't know what you call that, but there's so much that needs to be done in terms of equality and diversity in Scotland. Now, there is that. And then if we're talking about music, there is cultural connections, which is, that would not, equality and diversity can go under that umbrella of culture. If we connect our cultures, if we understand that what brings people together, whether it's low income, disabled, people of Black or Asian, Southeast Asian culture, but we have to develop a kind of a society where people look at culture, find connections. So it looks like it's simple for, it's easier for people of other colors, which is, I mean, at some point it's been like, Black means everybody that is brown. So Southeast Asia, mixed race wasn't, those things are not taken into place, which means now that you can be Black Scottish and it doesn't really matter. So you have to be branded under that. So I think culture and heritage has to play a lot to help equality and diversity. So, because if the people from these communities, from these neighborhoods, that they see themselves as a culture within a society, then it's just like the historical facts that are making some of the conversations are not flowing really well because they're disruptive, so deliberately in some conversations, to be honest with you, like historians either telling you facts or telling you lies. So we're confused about that. So those things has to be looked at. History, what does history tell us? What does our common, what do we have in common as a heritage, as a people, as a human race? Music brings people together, but certain race music is promoted than others. This is all about who is controlling the narrative. So the heritage is not looked at as the same. If you speak to people in the heritage sector, they say we don't have any diversity, but the heritage sector has so much history that link with all of us, whether you're Black, you're Asian, you're white. It links so much, but you have to go in there to know what has people within the heritage sector in Scotland done to help equality and diversity. When they hold the history, they hold the stories, they have all our stories. Whether you were born in Africa or born in Scotland or born in Europe, there is a connection that is lying in the cultural sector, the art sectors, the history, the heritage sectors, but they're just not exploring that. So that for me is deliberate. And I've been having a lot of conversation with people in the heritage sector with regard to this. So if we look at, if things like equality and diversity are discussed as if it's kind of separate, these are things that are linked directly to that aspect. Heritage, Do we have that? It's culture. Do we understand the cultures that are within our society? Then we can progress from there to see why we need this, we need that, we need that. Black music, going back to music, I just touched the last point. The thing about black, they say black music. I don't know, I'm calling it black music, which is a bit strange to call black music because it's made by a black person. But Black Eminem wasn't black, but he did hip hop. Was he doing black music or was he doing music? So it's a culture. So it's a culture that Eminem grew up in. It's not the color of the people. It's not because, he found himself, he wanted to be with this set of group of people. No, it's the music and it's a culture. The music is a culture. So we need to look at that. We need to be looking at how can we help the institution really. I don't know if we need to help the institution. The institution really actually needs to know how to reach out to, other people with other cultural heritage, which are all linked, to see how we can improve the heritage sector, the cultural sector, and then all of this, the mainstream now, or mainstream media, or a broadcaster will see why we can have music from played by by someone who is black or who is Asian in Scotland. So those are the things that I think we have to connect all of that. So there's quite a lot there to look at, but the heritage sector need to take a big step to help this.
Yeah, I think in Scotland we have an issue with a lot of sectors and a lot of organisations who should work in tandem that don't conversate, and that's a huge issue. And for a small nation, we should be able to do it. But Becky, what's your thoughts on that? And maybe you could tell us a bit about the work you're doing out with music in this new project as well.
This project it is music, but it's a collaboration. It's been really great. Some background. I got to do this commission by Sustrans, who are working to make walking and cycle paths accessible, and also just make people aware of that and get people more active in general, I guess. And so they've commissioned 8 artists to create some sort of artwork for further paths for Black History Month. And I got to do a project for them. And what I did was took some inspiration from Jackie Kay, who's a prominent Scottish poet, really wonderful poet, and I took some words of hers and wrote a song from with that as a starting point, which is also something I'd never done. So it was creatively just like a new challenge and quite an interesting, new way of writing, and so it's become a spoken word part of a song that I've then recorded, and I recorded it all with my own voice. I think that was quite important to me, that it would be, very much a very me project, and I think the most me thing is just all vocals, so it's all vocal based, and then I collaborated with a dear friend of mine who's an amazing director, Olivia Middleton, and we've created a video for it, and I'm going to do some performances next week, actually. So yeah,
is that anywhere people can see those performances? Is that?
Yes, in Edinburgh, on the walkway at the Water of Leith. So it's going to be in Coley Park. It's on the 10th and the 13th. The one on the 10th, so the Sunday, is at 2:30, and then the 13th is at 6:30. I don't actually know when this is getting broadcast, but yeah.
That's excellent, and I think that, again, coming to that, we'd actually spoken about this before, like the collaboration between music and film and visuals is kind of on the way back up, and again, it's been a thing that's not always worked in tandem the way it should, and I don't know about you, but I think film and that media is such a great way of telling stories and enhancing the music, and it's good in it. I think that's great. So is that something we could see more of when you're going to bring obviously you've got new music coming soon, I believe.
Yeah. So basically, my solo project, the music has been in this final stage for quite a while. So I'm just excited to finally get to release something very soon. But yeah, so this is just kind of like a wee precursor. But yeah, it's just been, this whole project has been really, I don't know how to describe it, but the whole thing you talked about earlier about home, and I think I got to explore that quite a lot within the project, because Jackie uses, she talks about words and her accent, about losing her accent when she moved down south, and I think all of that and how it shapes our identity and where we feel at home, all of that, just tied in with how I feel about
with a lot, the way I see it is like, I feel like for Black Scots and Black Scottish culture is kind of in its infancy. So where do you see the future of Black Scottish culture and artists? Like, do you, I mean, that's just a general statement. Like, I would love to know your answer, but for me as well, I believe that I'd love to see a lot more of the artists here, especially some of the artists in the hip hop scene, start to believe that they do have a culture of their own up here and just own it, because I feel like a lot of people I talk to still really focus on that London thing, especially when it comes to hip hop and grime and R&B. But in general, Scotland, I think across that. So, what do you see as the future of the Black Scottish culture, and how do you see that working in tandem with, I suppose, the existing cultures, especially the working class culture, who we've seen in other countries seems to start to clash a bit because of, again, like George has talked a bit earlier, because of narratives. How do we see that culture going, and how do we keep it a positive narrative that becomes beneficial to the wider communities of Scotland? I mean, Becky, do you want to go first for this one?
I'm not sure.
That's a big question for I don't know what day, Wednesday morning.
For Wednesday morning.
Did you want to say something, George, or did you not? No.
The pressure's on you first, Becky, I think.
Okay. I'm not sure if I'm able to speak on that so much, because
That's okay. It's easy for me. I'm asking the questions, so I don't have the pressure of answering.
Well, I think there's definitely, as I said, I've been around. I literally DJed in Glasgow for like almost 11 years, in around Glasgow, Edinburgh, and I kind of know there's been a culture that's been building for a long time, but it's, the Black Scots that have been here. I mean, it's changed as well, because the Black Scot identity in the music scene was coming from people that were not sure whether they were looking at themselves as if they're just temporary here, because they came from refugees, asylum seekers background, which means at the time that music scene was beginning to grow, beginning to develop or create a scene, the status were not clear whether they're going to stay here. But they were kids like that were about 16, 17. They're all grown now, and they've been around. Some of them continue to do music, like producers and helping out with music projects. So there's a culture that's been growing. You are right, Matt, to say it probably still in its infancy, but if you take that Emily Sande came from Glasgow, we've had Paul, what's the guy from Paisley? Paola
Nutini.
Nitini, yes, came from Glasgow and came from Paisley. So this is me just talking the timeline of about 10 years, 10, 15 years. So I'm seeing, I know Emily Sunday, was around in that scene, that new scene that has been growing. So, but when they, obviously moving to London, or there's someone trying to get a hold of me. Right. So moving, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Obviously, when they signed up in London and then you move there, there's a culture change, and then there's all of that. So those are people that should be also tasked to come back and develop develop the music scene, because it's there. We cannot continue to export our music, export our talent, and then we stay behind and complain there are not enough talent. When everyone, once you hit your peak, you're out. Once you get signed up, you're out. No record company in Scotland that signs up talent. No radio stations that dedicate time for Scottish talent. So, and those things, when I say Scottish talent, it also means that there will be emphasis on Black Scottish music. Mm-hmm. What is Black Scottish music? It's all influenced by different cultures, and those things need to be seen. There are people here that have done, there are Black Scots here that have done music that's literally sold in Africa, for example, which I know, that are sold in Africa, but they've never sold one single record in Scotland or even in the UK. So it's just that aspect that we need to look at. That's a Scottish export, because that artist still lives in Scotland. They are based in Scotland. The family's based here. They grew up here. So those are things that need to be happening, so that the artists need to still connect to the local. There is a prospect of that to grow. There's a big synergy that we need to build, which is where I'll probably come in again to say, this is what Jambo Radio want to do. We know, but we're just a radio station. We're just a small community radio station. We need to do that. We need to start supporting that.
I think that's where it starts, though. It's grassroots and mentorship, like you say, is such an important thing. I think above funding, even above funding, like mentorship and making sure that we have each other's backs and we have the skills to compete in the market. And maybe, Becky, it'd be good to know, like, if you could go back to tell your younger self, like, any advice on both being an artist and being an artist of color and a female artist, like, what would your advice be, or to any younger people, like, in terms of just like what is your advice for challenging those obstacles and staying true to yourself and not giving away any of yourself in the quest to be, I suppose, a success?
Probably that, owning it and just sticking with your gut rather than believing that, like, you have to kind of play along with everyone else. And I think that's just the case for everyone, but it just feels maybe like an extra challenge sometimes when you feel like you're the only female in the room, or you're the only whatever it is that you're facing, because I guess there's so many different ways that we can have obstacles. So I think it's always the same advice, and it's always really hard to actually follow.
Yeah, it is. It's the hardest thing, and it's hard to get good advice in music. Yeah, I think. Sorry, George, there you go.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, it's really challenging. I'm just what Becky is saying there. It's good to just focus and just do your thing, and try to do as what you can do. I followed the documentary of one of the girls of Little Mix. I don't know if you did watch that, Matt, but this is is the mixed race girl that is in that band, the only mixed race girl that was in that band. I don't know if she's still there, but I followed that documentary, and these are some of the issues that the conversation we're having here today is the same challenges and barriers that she faced when the band became big. They came through a music competition, So I'm sure their success just came by surprise. And now this girl being the only Black girl, at the time that she joined that band, she didn't see herself as Black or white, but she know that she has a mixed heritage, or mixed, she's a mixed race. Until the band got the big break, and then she started to see how the kind of treatment she was getting in the band. You just go back to what you were saying earlier about how female artists are treated compared to the male counterpart. Those are equality stuff and things like that. But you see, a successful band, but the only Black member of that band is treated separately, separately, just because they see her as Black.
Mm.
So these are things that she made a cool documentary around that, actually challenged Sony Music on that as well. So there is quite a lot. One of the things that I wanted to mention in this conversation was there is an issue with how even the way music is going now, with all the streaming platform, and then with who is controlling the music. Globally, music is taken up by the big record companies, Sony, Warner Bros. Music, and all the sort of small record labels don't have a chance, despite the fact that there's all the streaming platform that can expose people's music, can expose all the music, but there's still a problem with who signs up these artists, because they still control. Some of the songs are challenged. I mean, we try and play songs that are, we promote music of Black people on the radio station. But sometimes we get challenged from the big record company, how we're supposed to have copyright of the song and this and that. And every time we've challenged that, they've dropped their claim. But it's a process that they're also pushing to control that. There are free platforms that people can expose their music on, but still want to be controlled by the big giant companies.
I think you're right, George. I think the major stronghold in music is definitely it's brought a worthlessness to music. They've whittled it down so that the art has no worth, but they have all the value. And I read a statistic last week that the top 7 artists in Spotify earn on average $500,000 a year from streaming. The other kind of 95% of artists earn on average £25 a year, and the major labels earn 100 million a month each from streaming. So what we have now is an industry that is generating worth, but the worth's going to the corporation, not to the people who make it. And at the end of the day, music isn't a business if music doesn't exist, but we don't value artists. And film's done a great thing where they've put the film and the content and the writers as the valued ones, because that's how we have content, whereas music doesn't value artists. And in the UK, I think it's 83% of professional musicians don't make the minimum wage, not even the living wage, but the minimum wage. And there's no reason for all the money to be put into Harry Styles and Ed Sheeran when they already have generated so much, and for them to own so much wealth, when every artist could have because a lot of people see this conversation, they think, no, well, boo-hoo, you don't get paid. It's like, it's not about being millionaires, it's that people aren't making enough to pay their rent, even people who are writing hit songs. There's people who have written number ones who were working for Uber during lockdown, and that's not right. And that's like, but again, it comes back to, we need to look at it as we've lost music as a liberal thing. Like, people think of music as liberal, so they don't realise like these same people are Tory donors and they believe in the Tory foundations of society, and it's the push towards the right, and it's capitalism. And it's like, people keep saying, oh, you shouldn't say bad things about capitalism, but again and again and again and again, people keep starving and keep getting poor and they keep getting not paid, but they will not even consider what an alternative would be. And capitalism is ruining art, it's ruining prospects, it's ruining people, it's ruining families. And there's this refusal to challenge it because it's easy, because that, whatever it is, 5% of people have it easy and the rest of us are continually making, and man, that's, let's be honest, that's not that far removed from slavery, because we're all making the products so that other people can get the wealth, and it's that same system that's been passed down, and it's not changed. And it's like, it's not that anyone's necessarily upholding that system either, it's just that we're not changing it.
Yeah.
And it has to change. Music, honestly, I don't know if music will exist in the way we think. Because how can it? Like, there's no I mean, look, I mean, Becky, you'll know this as well as anyone, like, the headliners of festivals are the same headliners we were seeing 20 years ago, 2006. When I saw some of the headliners for Transmit, it's good to see some people back, but let's face it, some of these artists are the same people we saw 15, 16 years ago. That's not a success, that's a failure. We need to stop applauding that, like, oh my goodness, you got them to come back. No, we had to wheel them out because there's nothing else. And until we're honest about that, nothing changes.
Yeah, because when is the next person going to get a chance? Yeah,
I mean, literally, I think most people in music are sitting hoping that the Gallagher brothers make up and they can make some finance off Oasis reuniting, rather than thinking, how do we get the next band that's bigger than Oasis? Because that is how dumb people at the top of this industry are, because they just want quick money and they don't care about music. And half the people I meet who work in music couldn't talk to you about a record. They've never listened to it. They don't know anything about music. And they've just been rich enough to have been able to play it working in music, is what's happened. And until people start having honest conversations and saying, you know what, we don't want to be part of that business because it's not even good. I mean, the fact that we haven't created a star since Amy Winehouse, you know what I mean? Like, a whole business hasn't been able to create a genuine superstar, and they think they're successful because they've got this monopoly on streaming. Like, it's just, you know what I mean? It's like, it doesn't work for artists, it doesn't work for the community, it doesn't work even the live sector. Like, when that went with COVID, what was the business left with? When the live sector wasn't propping up the recording sector, it's like, honestly, I feel like we need to start again. It's like, we need to tear that whole system down and go,
I think especially during COVID, it became so apparent how many musicians that were full-time musicians suddenly became Uber drivers and Deliveroo cyclists and whatnot. Like, just it's insane, like how pretty much nobody was able to sustain being a musician, even though they were doing well.
Even crew, like, even the crew members who
especially crew
are the heart and soul of that live industry, they realised, you know what, working at Amazon might not pay quite as much, but I'm home and I see my family and I've got a consistency and I have, or they're going and working in rigging for in Dubai, and like, oh, I get to come home for 3 months, but I get paid. It's like, when we all walked away from it, we thought, why are we going back? But we're going back because we love it. But we shouldn't have to just go back because we love it. We should be able to go back and say, you know what, we want to build something that we know young people can. It shouldn't be a gamble. It shouldn't be like, oh, don't maybe do music because it might not work out. We should know that we've got jobs for young people in Scotland to go into, and it's a solid career, right?
Especially, I was speaking to a sound engineer, really high-end sound engineer in Germany recently, who was talking about that exact thing, that during COVID, a lot of his colleagues who were like doing the biggest productions in Germany were suddenly taking on other jobs, and they've stayed within other jobs because they've just found that it was a more, rewarding industry to be in. Like, so they just left after COVID, just not coming back.
That's it, and things need to change, but we're going to have to wrap up. But before we go, let's just, I always ask this on Sunday Social, so for both of you, what was the first gig you ever attended? And also your first gig that you performed. Let's just do attended, because I love it, because I love to see what people try to kid on they didn't go and see.
I don't know. I think the first venue gig was Jamie Cullum, if I'm not mistaken. I think that might have been it. Yeah. With my sister.
Nice. George, what about you? I don't know if we've lost George. Oh, well, what was the first gig you performed as an artist, Becky?
I started doing gigs again with my sister and a friend doing a cappella thing. So there was like another friend as well. So there was, I think the first gig was, there were four of us and we're doing this a cappella set, just vocals. I think I was maybe 10 or something like that.
Wow.
So but I was obviously within a group, so it was very much different thing from later on. But
That's amazing. I don't know if I think I maybe started playing guitar at 10. It was the first time I'd piqued my interest to get involved in music, but I don't know if I played a show for a lot.
I mean, I don't know if I'd call it a show, but you know.
Yeah, no, do it. It sounds better.
Little gigs.
I don't know if we're going to get George back because we've got to wrap up, but so we might have him, but before we go, tell everyone where they can find you, Becky, how they follow you, and maybe do you have any rough dates for when we might see new music, or you know, where can they find you? If no dates are there, where can they follow you to make sure that they see when music comes?
It's my social media handle is just at Becky Sikasa, pretty much anywhere. And on my website, I keep things updated as well. So it's just beckysikasa.com. And at the moment, actually, which we'll be launching this week, is this Black History Month project. That'll be on my website very soon, and on my Instagram and whatever as well.
And can people attend that when are you filming it on the at the weekend?
The performances, no, people can attend. It's outside. Anyone can just come by. Hopefully people will just walk along, cycle along.
Amazing. Well, hopefully everyone watched it. George, before we go, what was your first ever concert? And then after that, tell us where people can follow you and find you and keep up to date with Jambo Radio.
Yeah, absolutely. My first ever Scottish concert was in Edinburgh at the what's this hall? Is it? No, it's not Royal Albert Hall. No, it's not that one. There's a big concert hall in Edinburgh. I've forgotten the name, but this is a long time ago. I think it's like 15 years ago. But now this there was a band that came over from France. You know, it was a blend. That's a proper culturally mixed band that had, you know, a Senegalese singer. It had people from someone from Cuba, Mexico. It was brilliant. That was the first time I've been to a gig like that I felt so happy. And I've never forgotten it. I've forgotten the name of the hall, but the band was really good. You know, the thing that I could see there was how much diversity and culture really bring people together. That band was a good example of that. That's some years ago. So we're Jambo Radio available on all social media platforms, and we are at Jambo Radio on Twitter, at Jambo Radio 1. And on Facebook, we are Jambo Radio Scotland, and also on Instagram at jamboradio.scotland. Yes, jamboradio.scotland. I think that's the one. So those are our social media handles. We're available online. We're also on mobile app. You can download our app, Jambo Radio.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. Cool. And yes, I think, you can find us there, and we're available online. Just Google Jambo Radio, and you find us. Jambo Radio Glasgow, Jambo Radio Scotland, you'll find us.
Amazing. Well, thank you both so much for your time and for everyone for watching. And I think the important thing we're all saying today is that, like, diversity and equality and inclusion is important, and just celebrate culture. Black History Month. Like, if you don't know a lot, go and read, just find out, talk. And I think it's important to find out about Black Scots as well. Like, obviously sometimes when Black history, we get sucked into the American thing and the UK thing, which is important, but also home, wherever that may be, is also important. And if there isn't much history, it's time to create it, and it's time to make something new. So thank you so much for everyone's time and for listening in for this cultural conversation.
Thank you for having us. It was really lovely meeting you as well, George.
Nice to meet you, Becky. Since you